Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew, and tonight I'd like to welcome former military police officer and CIA operative, master hypnotherapist, and private investigator and researcher of human-alien encounters, Mr. Derrel Sims. How are you doing tonight, Derrel?
I'm glad to be here. It's a real privilege.
Great, great. Well, I'd like to start with a little bit about your background and kind of what got you started in your current field of research.
Well, actually, there's two sides of that. First is I bring a heavy investigative background from the military police when I volunteered during the Vietnam War in the military in the United States Army. And second, I spent 2 years of my 3-year hitch in the Army stationed in the Central Intelligence Agency in covert operations. I was sheep dipped, and that means simply they take you out of the military and make everybody still think you're in, and then they place you or sheep dip you, move you to their own operations. And so I bring a background from that as well. And then I've been a private investigator for 30 years. So I bring all those for an investigative aspect of the phenomena. So that's from a professional point, that's where I'm coming from. From a practical viewpoint, I experienced my own abduction at age 4 in Midland, Texas, and that forever changed my life. But what brought me to an abductee to an alien hunter is they came and got my son. When they did that, that forever changed my outlook on things. And you can tamper with me, you can get away with things. I'm a big guy, I can handle it. But when you come after my children, right, you're in trouble.
Right, understood. So can you tell us a little bit about what your current investigation, what it entails, what your everyday research entails?
Well, realistically, I spend about half of my time going to conferences, and I'll be in contact in the desert as an example on May 31st to the 3rd of June. And there is an example, and I'm going to numerous countries from this year alone in the United Kingdom. Then from there, I'll travel immediately over to Italy, and I'll stay there for 10 days and do investigations there, and then finally do a conference for them as well. But in meeting in these conferences, people come to me privately many times, and they ask all kinds of questions. And like you, they watch my work, and some of these people are very serious in as much as they'll go to a conference 2 or 3 times, and when they hear me and see me enough and attend my workshops, they realize this guy is not only serious, he knows what's going on, and they validate me. And if once that happens, and until that happens, they remain in the shadows. They stay quiet. But when they come out with some fascinating information about their case and about what's going on with their life.
Now, could you talk about your experience in the CIA? Could you tell us anything about what you did in the CIA?
Well, I could tell you, Chris, but you know the punishment for that.
I do.
Of course, I'll tell you. I have a lot of funny stories I could tell about that. There is one conference, one only conference in the whole world that I don't get to go to. Carla Turner, when she was alive, she said, why don't you invite Derrel Sims? He's one of the best people I've ever seen. He's the best friend of mine. And they said, once CIA, always CIA. So he's spying on us. Well, I got news for you. You don't have to spy on anybody in the UFO community. All you got to do is order the tapes. You don't even have to attend the conference. It's really funny. But what I did in the CIA was several things. Number one, I was a martial arts instructor there. I was, as I said, part of a military police component, special unit there as well. And I was a weapons instructor there. And our work, of course, was in covert operations in the Central Intelligence Agency. Basically, the CIA, Mossad, the KGB, any intelligence agency, I don't care who they are, they exist with two primary objectives. One is they lie, and they lie consistently, and they all do. And they have to, because in the intelligence business, you can't let anybody know what you're doing. And which brings up the alien. The alien functions just like an intelligence community, in my viewpoint, because they simply can't let anybody know what they're really up to. So what you get are these whoppers that they tell different nations around the world, and I've been to a bunch of them, all have a different story about the alien, about where they are, who they are, what they're doing. It's the same thing with Native Americans. We're going to have a Native American conference here in Houston, representing several different tribes and several different perspectives primarily. And my point is that every one of them's got a different story. Look, I used to be a cop. And if you've got a dead body laying on the floor and 8 people standing around, and I walk in and say, what's this knife doing in this body? Who did it? And everybody looks at you and tells you 8 different stories. Guess how many people get to go downtown? Every one of them.
Right.
Find out what's going on. It's a ruse. It's a red herring or a whopper. It's a lie. Many of these things, you can't get 8 stories in a row from about the same exact event and expect them all to be true. I just don't buy it.
Right. Now, you said that you were abducted at an early age. Can you tell us about that experience?
I can. The event happened when I was 4 years old, approximately 4.5 years old. And I had no idea what was going on. It was 1952. Goodness sakes. Nobody knew anything about aliens back then. There was no TV of showing alien stories and movies and things like that. And nobody had interest anyway and would know none of it made sense. So I'm laying in bed, and I don't realize then, but I do now, that the entity had just brought me back, placed me in bed, and I had a suspicion something serious was going wrong, and opened my eyes very quickly, and I noticed he was walking away from me. He's walking toward a wall. And I thought, well, he's going to bump into the wall. I didn't know he's going through the wall. I didn't know that.
Right.
So as soon as he heard me think that, he turns around, and this was really weird. He turns around, and I hear him mentally say to me, "It's awake." And I realize that his little tiny mouth doesn't speak, and he's got a large bulbous head. He's pure white. He's large black eyes that are perfectly round. They're not like the Hollywood version, the elliptical eyes you see in these books and things like that. This guy had perfectly round eyes that were very large, almost no nose, no ears, and very skinny. And to me, he was large because he was bigger than I was. And the strange things, and kids notice things sometimes adults don't notice or don't get right off the bat. I noticed first of all, it's winter. It's very cold. I'm under a lot of covers. And he hasn't got any clothes on. And as I look at him, going down from his large bulbous head to his large black eyes, which are mesmerizing, I look at him and I notice he doesn't have any mammary glands. He doesn't have a belly button, and he doesn't have a T-team. If you don't have those things, we did, so to speak. And second,
Derrel, you froze up there for a minute. You froze up. you froze up after you were describing what he looked like. You said he didn't have any genitals, and then
he didn't have any genitals whatsoever. And as a little kid, 4 years old, he didn't have a TT. So
right.
I realized he didn't have any equipment like we did, and certainly not like I did. And so I just was really confused by this whole event. How to get in my house, how to get in, and I mean, wear your clothes, it's wintertime. None of this made sense to me. And I realized, of course, after investigating years after this, that if you don't have genitals, you're not procreating, and you don't have belly button, you weren't born. You were either hatched, cloned, or manufactured. So you got here some other way. So the question is, who are you and why are you in my room? And he never would answer those questions.
Wow. So was that the last encounter that you personally had?
No, it wasn't. There was, let me see. The best way to describe this is I had events between 4 and age 13. Age 17. And at age 17, my events ended violently with 5 entities present that were still not in UFO literature to this date. But the next major event was we moved from Texas, from Midland, Texas to Mayhill, New Mexico, which is right in the middle of nowhere, basically. It's a little tiny town. It's literally, you're on one side of the street or the other. And it was really hilarious because the Baptists lived on one side of the street and the Church of Christ lived on the other, and that's basically the way that the little town was divided. But one night, I walked out to, and this is, again, about 1953, 54. It's long time ago, and we were building, my dad was building a house, a little house, and we were living in a basement of a building at this time. And so we had an outhouse, and outhouse is an outdoor bathroom. And so I went out there that night to use the bathroom. And as I opened the door to leave, there was the same cosmic skinhead looking at me that was there before, that picked me up before.
Wow.
So this was a shock beyond understanding again, because here I was out in the night, and as I shut the door, there he was standing there. And the next thing I noticed is the next day, which was Saturday, I was out pulling the heads off of dozens and dozens of grasshoppers. And I couldn't figure out, why are you doing that? Why am I killing these little insects? I love animals and bugs and things like that, and there are lots of them out there. And I couldn't understand why I was doing this. And I finally pulled one of the little bugs right next to my face, and I looked at it real close, and I realized that's not him. It was a praying mantis that got me the night before. That's who they took me to. It wasn't a grasshopper, it was a praying mantis.
Have you ever experienced anyone that has experienced military abductions?
This does show up once in a while in conversations. In some of these events, I can tell you categorically that the alien will lie, and they're the best. They are masters at using what I refer to as the true not Stockholm syndrome, but the true masking of their actual intentions. In other words, they can make you believe anything. They can make you believe anything standing there. Them or your relatives, deceased relatives, doesn't make any difference. They're masters at this. And sometimes they will develop a case where they'll have the alien look like, to you in your mind, the military. And sometimes they do that to make the abductee doubt their own military, is a good example. In other cases, we have reason to believe that, in fact, some intelligence agency was present, and that they may have actually staged the event so that the quote unquote alien abduction actually didn't happen. It was someone else staging it. And that can happen. And I'll give you one good, clear example for your audience. I was on a radio show a long time ago, back in the 1990s, a very famous show with a famous guy. And he said, he asked this question about military abductions and so on. And what happened was I got 600 phone calls and emails that in the next few days. One of the phone calls was from a guy that as I spoke to him, I realized, and I have a top secret clearance, and I realized that he is so far ahead of me. He's way above my pay grade. And I told him, I said, I need for you to get off the phone right now, immediately. Hang up, get off the phone, and don't ever call me again. And he said, but I'm an abductee. He was actually crying. He was really upset. He's wanting help. And he's the only person I've ever turned down for help. And I said, listen to me carefully. I am not that important. They monitor my websites and so on. I know that. I've got good intel on that. Crypto intelligence operation guy told me one time in great detail of what they were doing. And I told him, I said, it's not me they're really interested in. It's who's contacting me. And you're in a perfect position to lose your career. Now, in his case, if he's really an abductee, and I think that he was, it would behoove them in the intelligence community to, quote unquote, abduct him in a scenario which would make him think the alien was there again. And then they would retrieve all that information and find out that they would in effect find out if he was compromised or if they were compromised. And under that circumstance, I certainly could understand why an intelligence community would do something like that.
Very interesting. Now, with your work, you actually do surgeries or assist with surgeries to remove implanted objects that the extraterrestrial has placed in your cases. Is that correct?
That is correct. I've done 25 surgeries, conducted 25 surgeries thus far. The last case that we did the surgery in was in India. In fact, I'll go back hopefully this year and do 2 more surgeries on the same patient, because there were 3 objects in this lady. And the surgeon who I hired the hospital and then hired the surgeon through the hospital, and he did not know what I was doing, and I didn't want him to know. He never knew anything about the word implants or any alien or anything. As he began to look at the x-rays, the other x-rays of the lady, he said, this is absolutely fascinating. He looked at me and said, Mr. Sims, when you come back to New Delhi, would you allow me to do the surgeries on these others? He said, these are far more interesting than the ones you removed. And I said, I certainly would. At that point, I knew none of these objects were inside this woman of her own volition. She did know that they were there. She was present and was conscious during the time the entities were talking to her. And it's fascinating because in the UFO phenomena, generally there are 7 flavors or kinds of entities that will show up in these events. You may have, in my case, like the one I had with the little gray alien, or the second one would be a taller alien, which looks just like him, but he's taller and he's a lot smarter than this. The little guys have an IQ about 80, 85. They're not that smart, and they literally make so many mistakes. Sometimes you can't even get your clothes on right. The second one is which sometimes people refer to him as the doctor. He looks just like the alien. He's just bigger, and he's a lot smarter. He's got an IQ of about 130, 140. And he's very smart. And if you're, in some cases, a human entity will show up. Some people refer to them as a Nordic. They will be blondish hair, but that's not necessarily always true. They have black-haired ones. They have red-haired ones. In fact, the Native Americans a long time ago used to call them Cecistas in different terms. They were the white men before the white men got here, and really befuddled they couldn't figure out who these guys were. And then sometimes you'll see the mantis being who is extremely intelligent. And then sometimes you'll see some of the guys that are more in charge, and that is, in fact, the reptile. And that's what she finally, the human ones brought her, the grays, the human ones brought her in, introduced her to the reptile guy. He lied to her, of course, and said they were going to implant her up here in the clavicle area. And she wouldn't feel it. She wouldn't know anything. She did. And it was very painful. And they also put in 2 other implants, which they did not intend for me to find. They intended for me or someone to find the first one. They said it would never be noticed. She would never feel anything. Well, it's very obvious. It was a pretty good sized bump on her above her clavicle in the shoulder muscle area. And it was a lie. That's all there is to it. Now, the other 2 were very well situated, very well placed in the side and in the thigh. That's the 2 that the surgeon was absolutely fascinated with. And I still hadn't told him anything, but basically these things are, they're invasive, to say the very least. The objects are, they retrieve, or in our opinion, retrieve or transmit information to the abductee, to the alien. In other words, aliens sometimes can come to a person, and you may never physically be taken anywhere. You may be just there. And the reason is he doesn't have to take you, because there's no point in it. All he can do is download or upload the information. It doesn't make any difference. Now, the fascinating thing, and this is really important for your audience to know this, there's a lot of stuff on the internet that is simply misleading about the alien implants. Number 1, they're very rare. Number 2, if you're an abductee, it is highly unlikely that you have an implant. Highly. I look at hundreds of x-rays every year, and I can assure you most of these people do not have alien implants. They just don't.
Now, have you ever had any of these tested?
We have. The first cases we made public were in 1995, and the 2 of them, one of them came from the hand, and another one came from another patient from the top of her foot. And in that case, there were 3 objects removed from the woman and 1 from the back of the man's hand. And the cases are fascinating, but the bottom line is, it doesn't matter if it's a foreign object. What is it? And if it isn't extraterrestrial, it can't be an alien implant. Well, that's a bad assumption. The alien uses things of this planet all the time. But to answer the big question, was it extraterrestrial? Of course it was. But it still doesn't miss the point. It misses the point that the alien can use and does use things that are biological or whatever or about us. But in this case, the metal objects that were retrieved were tested by Los Alamos and New Mexico Tech, and they found the objects to be from a rare meteorite called the Widmanstatten, or the Yautshon meteorite. And they developed a special microscope that fired a laser into it, into the implants, and it contained the gases that would come off of that implant. And they found 11 different elements surrounding the so-called meteorite, or little needle-like projections 1/4 inch long, that made no sense to them. We found a crystalline belt surrounding one of the implants that made no sense to anyone. What would that be doing on a meteorite? Of course, we never told them that these so-called meteorites were housed in a biological cocoon that the pathologist said was simply impossible to be in that location.
Very fascinating. And so I understand not only have you seen implants, but there have actually been entities. I would guess you would say women being impregnated with entities. Is that correct?
That is correct. There was, it's just kind of a funny story. And I have some good friends that are MUFON people, and so I don't want to belittle anyone here. But MUFON had just come out with a statement that many of these women who claimed these so-called pregnancies, alien pregnancies, in fact, they were not alien, that the women simply didn't know their bodies, or that they were hallucinating, various different answers. You know, many doctors do this. They're going to give a prosaic answer to these people because it simply can't be true. Well, a friend of mine who was one of the top investigators in MUFON at the time invited me to his home up in Minnesota, and there were a bunch of MUFON investigators there. He said, "I'd like for you to give a small conference to these people." I said, "I'd be glad to. What would you like for the subject to be on?" He said, "Well, of course, alien implants." I said, "But they don't exist according to MUFON in the sense of the word. The worst implant, in my opinion, and that is that the alien would literally install an alien fetus inside a human being." And so I did the implant presentation. Everybody was very impressed, very happy. And then I said, "Here's the worst implant that ever was, in my opinion." And then I showed them sonograms of an alien entity in a woman. I'm telling you, you could have dropped a pin on a carpet and heard it hit. They did not move. They didn't say a word, and they were horrified to see this alien fetus inside this woman. And the worst part of it was, I said, and for those of you who think this might be photoshopped or something like that, I have the sonograms. These are pictures of the sonograms. And second, this is a fascinating story because I didn't believe any of it. Because the woman came to me with a story that involved something of the intelligence community and the alien. Not together, but one spying on the other. The intelligence community was spying on the alien. And I just didn't believe it. I thought, what a whopper. And then I got the sonograms. I took the sonograms on my trip to the United Kingdom, to the finest fetal hospital, the baby hospital you could imagine. And I met a doctor there, and I said, "I'm a private investigator in the state of Texas, and I would like for you to look at these sonograms." And I just tossed them on the table in random and said, "Tell me what you think of them." I said, "This is not a criminal case. I'm just looking at these, wondering, are they valid? Are they real? Or is there anything, are they okay?" And she said, "I'll bring in a consult." And she's a specialist. She brought in another consult. And they both looked at everything, and she started rearranging the sonograms. And she said, "Wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. That's not right." I said, "What is it that's not right, doctor?" She said, "Whoever took these sonograms was not interested in the fetal development of the fetus whatsoever. See, that's not there, that should be there." And she said, "Oh my God, what a strange little head. I mean, a long pointed chin and a large bulbous head. This just doesn't make any sense." And I gathered up the sonograms, put them back in my pocket, said, "I want to thank you for your assistance." And they just stood there with their mouths open. They could not figure out what in the world this fetus was. They were looking at the fetus of an alien entity inside this woman. And the scenario goes like this. The alien then comes back and picks up the fetus within the first trimester. And then you have this so-called spontaneous abortion, or you think you do. And there's no fetus, there's no residue, there's nothing. And the worst case scenario, you'll be pregnant and your doctor will diagnose you with a dual pregnancy. And this is not uncommon at all with the women that go through this phenomena. You'll end up only having one child and there's no fetus of the other one. It's gone. What's worse than all of that is your child, 5 or 6 years old, becomes an abductee, and they say, Mama, why didn't you tell me about my sister? What are you talking about? My sister. You don't have a sister. Yes, I do. I met her last night on that craft. And the mother is just horrified.
Wow. Now, what do you think some of the purposes of these, you know, the fetuses would be? Are they using it for some sort of genetic experiments, do you think?
Well, again, I want to kind of make this, I'm not very kind to the alien, as you can imagine. They call me the alien hunter. Evidence means everything to me. I don't care too much about opinion or even mine, because I use 7 different hats to look at this phenomena. One of them is the Native American hat, one of them is a science hat, one's a medical hat, one's an intelligence hat, and so on and so on. All these give me 7 different viewpoints to look at the same phenomena. Some of the hats don't even agree with each other. It doesn't matter to me. It only matters what I find with the hats. Most of us have a UFO hat. The problem with the UFO hat is it can be fooled, and it often has. It's been fooled by the intelligence community. It's been fooled by fake UFO people. It's been fooled by liars in the UFO community. It's easy to fool. And that hat is a fun hat to wear, but it's a mistake to rely upon only that hat. I just think it is. So one of the things I want to say to you and your audience is there's 3 levels of truth with the alien. The first thing they tell you, or the first thing that you see with the alien, for the most part, is not true. For instance, well, they must be doing DNA experiments on me or on us. Why? They're here to upgrade us or something like that. No, that's the ruse. The alien is not told the true story of their origins and everything else to anyone yet. They keep making up other stories. Every country I go to has a different story. I went to Turkey. They said, oh, we don't have any aliens here. They don't do that. And I said, actually, they do. And he said, the guy listened to me for 7 hours on the flight on the way to Turkey. He said, that's fascinating, but we don't have that here in Turkey. I said, yes, you do. He said, no, we don't. I said, tell me about the jinn of Islam. And he got scared and said, we don't talk about that. They might never bring you back. You don't talk about them. I said, okay. It's the same group of guys, buddy. It doesn't make any difference. You can cloak it with your religion. You can cloak it with mythology. You can cloak it with science. You can cloak it with medical stuff. It doesn't make any difference. It's still a whopper. So that's the first thing. The first impression or information you usually get from the alien is incorrect. And I'll use myself as an example. When the alien was there and I realized he wasn't supposed to be there and I didn't know who he was, I wasn't paralyzed. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't anything. 4 years old in bed there. And I'm sitting up in bed. And the next thing I realized is his eyes moved. There was a small amount of movement in his eyes. And I could see that clearly because there was an ambient light in the room. And from the outside, our well house had a light on the outside that shone through my window, so I could see him clearly. And I instantly became paralyzed. I have never in my life felt fear. At 4 years old, you don't know a whole lot about fear or anything. And all of a sudden, my whole world changed. And I finally realized after becoming an investigator, and then I've got over 2,000 cases worldwide, and I realized at that point, this is not my fear. That's his fear. He's transferring his fear to me. They live in a structured society that's so different than anything you and I can imagine. We apply humanness to them, say, oh, they must be doing DNA tests. They must be doing this. They don't have to be doing anything you think. The things that we're given to think about were given to us, and they're often patently untrue. The second level of truth, and this is going to sting a little bit, is they give us misleading information, and to the best investigators out there, are you ready for this? You're often spoon-fed your best information.
Right.
So, and I'm not a conspiracist. Don't get me wrong. When there's a lady who's been with me for 25 years, Jolene Ray Harrington, and she came by one night when I was doing a presentation, and this was in California, and she heard my presentation. She came by and she said, I said, do you have a question you want to ask or anything? She said, well, I'm not a groupie. I said, I didn't think you were. She said, I just want to ask you this question. You made an astounding statement up there, and Dr. Jacobs has spoken, you had just spoken, and you said the best investigators are often spoon-fed their information. I said, they are. She said, how about you? I said, I'm no better than anybody else. I said, they spoon-feed me too, whenever they think I need it to get me off course because I'm too close to a truth. She says, well, I don't get it. And I said, listen to me. The only difference between me and many other investigators is they don't know it. They think they just got great, unbelievable cases, the best intel, the best everything. They truly get it. And I said, when you're spoon-fed, you have to know that somebody's pulling your chain big time. And I said, I've discovered fluorescence, an alien fingerprint, basically on abductees, a fluorescence that we check them with. I discovered implants in 1960 in my own case because that's where I discovered implantation, because I went through it myself. And fluorescence we found on people in 1992. I said, my point is simply this. Anytime you get close to the alien, I don't care how smart you are, they're going to spoon feed you something new, something so unique, something so good. You're just not going to be able to leave that thing alone. And the third thing, the first is your first level of information is either false and patently untrue. Second level, it's misleading or you're spoon-fed if you're a really good investigator. And if you're not spoon-fed anything, you don't have to worry about anything because you're not good enough they don't need to feed you anything. You're already on the wrong track. And third is when you get close to the real issue. Now you've got problems. And then you will have intelligence people and other people watching you very closely, because it's not you they're interested in. You're not the big shot. I'm not the big shot. It's the level of information you're getting. And they know it's true because they already have it themselves. That's when you know that there's a problem. So and I'll go back to myself very quickly. The reason, after I became paralyzed, the entity started walking toward me. I was so scared. I had a little cot I slept on, and I pushed so hard when I fell backwards. I was so paralyzed and scared that it pushed the bed apart, and I fell. It made a Y between the wall and the bed, and I fell between the two. I still wrapped in my covers. I bounced my little head off the floor. And the worst nightmare of any child could ever have happened. It couldn't get to me easily, so it lifted up my covers under the bottom of the bed and lifted it and stuck its big head right up next to my face with that large black eye. Shift. It projected an image of a horrifying clown. It wanted me to remember it as a clown. It's a perfect... This is the perfect screensaver memory where they give you a false image. Literally, false memory syndrome was started by the alien. They're masters at it. And he wanted me to remember him as a clown, and it was a bad dream. And I kept shaking my little head, no, 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 no. And at age 4, if I could resist, you can resist at age 20, 30, 40, 50, 80. Doesn't matter. You can resist, you can do differently, and you can acquire different kinds of information through resistance. And I had a horrifying image of clowns after that. I knew he wasn't a clown. The clown that was trying to make me believe something else wasn't a clown that he wanted me to think he was. And many abductees have a horrifying imagery of clowns and horrific fears of them.
That would make sense as to why some people might see animals or dead loved ones or something during an abduction. Is that
absolutely true? Absolutely true. One lady called me not long ago, is a dear friend of mine out in California, and she said, well, I had an event the other night, and I said, well, sweetie, tell me what happened. She says, well, I heard the doorbell ring. I said, sweetie, you and your husband live upstairs in a large home. How did you hear the doorbell ring at 3 a.m? And it's usually 2:11, 3:11, 4:11. It's usually the time frame of where you get abducted is usually a multiple of, it's a 1:11 scenario. I was born on 1:11, so I know this stuff very well. Anyway, she said, around downstairs, but listen to me. Why would you get up to go answer the doorbell at 3:11 in the morning, and your husband, your daughter, nobody woke up? Only you. And why would you run to the door and just swing it open at 3:11 in the morning? You know, I wonder who that might be.
right?
And she said, it was my dead relative. I said, anything unusual about your dead relative? And she, other than the fact that he was dead? And she said, well, he had kind of a greenish color to him, and I couldn't understand that. I said, what did you do, sweetie? She said, I just went jogging like I do it. Sometimes I jog at night. And I said, you went out there. Oh, my God. There's perfect it's a Stockholm syndrome where these abductees and contactees will basically go along with anything the alien will project to these people, anything at all. It's absolutely amazing what they'll go along with. And they're completely hoodwinked by the stuff. And they're being truthful themselves, but they don't know what's going on with them.
Now, earlier you had said that in most of these cases that there's reptilians in charge. Now, is that something that you experience all around in most every case, that there's usually a reptilian in charge?
A great question, and the best way to frame this for your audience, I think, is to let me describe the entities carefully. And again, this is going to sting to some of them a little. First, you got the little gray, you got the taller one, the gray, that's the boss, that's the doctor type. You've got a reptile guy, you've got a praying mantis guy, you've got a human being type guy, some people call the Nordic, and you've got another guy standing over there called Bigfoot. Yes, we've seen him in abductions. We've seen him on the craft. He's been there. I can give you some absolutely incredible information. 8 witnesses at one time saw all 7 of these flavors standing there. And my point is simply this. This is critical to understand if you're going to understand anything about the alien. These are not alien races you're looking at. You're looking at 7 different DNA models. If you look at them carefully, again, take off your UFO hat because it's not going to help you here. You're going to say, well, them's aliens from other planets. No, they're not. There may be aliens from other planets out there somewhere, but these guys are not them. You say, how do you know that? Well, first of all, put your cop hat on for a minute. It may be a little uncomfortable, but put it on and I'll help you with it. Let's just look at them critically. First of all, the reptile, where in the world are you going to find reptile DNA? You probably won't find it on Jupiter, probably won't find it on Zeta Reticuli, but you might find it on planet Earth. We've got plenty of reptiles here, lots of DNA to make that. Well, what about human beings? Well, we got plenty of human beings here. Where do you suppose they got the human being DNA? Well, I don't know, maybe Saturn or somewhere? Probably not. So what about Bigfoot? Well, we have ape-like creatures here all over the planet, don't we? Where in the world would you get simian DNA? Probably planet Earth. Planet Earth is a cosmic Walmart for DNA. That's where they're getting this stuff. And you take the DNA back out there, in the neighborhood, in our solar system. We have a pretty good idea of where. And the point is, you can recreate, quote unquote, alien beings to come down here and convince people that they're alien beings from other planets. In fact, the alien himself may not know the difference because he's a program in itself. And what I'm trying to tell your audience is these beings are hatched, cloned, manufactured, or made with the purpose of making us believe that they are aliens from other planets. There may be aliens from other planets. I'm not knocking that. I don't know. I hadn't been out there. I don't know everything that's out there. But I do know a lot about these 7 characters. And I'm telling you that they are not it. And so the real question is, why are they here? In fact, one of my native friends, because there's 2 primary views among natives. One is they're here to help us to save the planet, fix the ozone hole, and so on. And 2 is the other group, like some of my Cree friends up in Canada. They're not here to help us at all. In fact, they're here to do some terrible things. We better wake up. So my point is simply this: if you buy into their goodness, or the program they're running on you is not harmful in any way, in fact, it's pleasant, you're going to consider them aliens from other planets, and it's a wonderful thing. If you're like me and you wake up and you realize, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with this picture. I need a new hat. I need another way to look at these guys. And as I told my native friends, they said, but we call these, I said, what do you call them? He said, we call them the ant people. I said, listen to me carefully. You're my good friend. If they're called the ant people, why do they call them ant people? It's because they live underground. I said, I don't disagree with that either. But listen to me. I said, in the ancient pictographs on the wall, on the caves and walls around the world, and especially in this country, you'll see some of these pictographs are over 1,000 years old, at least 1,000. Some of them much older. You'll actually see some of these entities with little antenna on their head. They look like ants. Look at an ant head closely and look at the alien head and see if you don't see a similarity. No wonder you call them the ant people. The DNA is still from here. You're missing the whole point. And that's what I try to get across to my friends.
Now, if these are just cloned entities for interaction with us, would you say there's someone else over them in charge? Or something?
Somebody would have to be in charge, because it's like we can take this down on a human level too. You say, well, we just got here by accident. Well, that's possible. I don't buy that, because this is, in my view, an observer created universe, and science has been behind that for a long time. And that your observation on anything can alter it. And somebody's been observing us and all of this, and this is how it's coming. And God is a good answer for it generically, but there are other things too. And the other things out there are the ones who made, hatch, and clone, manufactured these guys to do the work for them surreptitiously. And if you ask the alien about this, you'll get things like, we're from Zeta Reticuli. And you say, or they'll say, we're from Saturn, or we're from Venus. Well, if Venus is a little hot right now, you'd probably get a real bad sunburn if you tried to come from Venus at all. Real hot place there. And might get a little cold on Saturn, I don't know. But it doesn't make any sense. Their stories are whoppers. It's like me asking somebody in a crime, where did you just come from? I came from Walmart. Okay. Well, Walmart's not anywhere around here. I'm in the grocery store. There's no close grocery store here. I'm at the little dollar store over there. You're making the whole thing up. You're just exchanging, and they do this a lot to people. And anytime somebody lies to you consistently, and I'll make it personal, anytime a guy lies to his girlfriend consistently, she needs to find another boyfriend.
Right.
He's lying. He's He's selling some whoppers. Anytime the alien lies to you and you catch him lying, and if you know what you're doing, you can actually catch him. You need to rethink your position of who he really is and who he is, number one, and two, what the program is that he's running on you that you don't even know about.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the real conspiracy.
Yeah, I would agree. And, I always did see the Greys, from all the stories you hear, as more of a robotic type of entity, just kind of like a worker bee. Would you agree?
Okay, I can help with that. I think we have reasonably good evidence that some of these entities are biomechanical. One of our abductees tore the eye cover off of one of them on 2 different occasions, and we saw a red stippled screen underneath the black eye with little white lines, 5 little white lines running there, like you might see on a computer screen in a medical hospital. That would indicate he's biomechanical. So that's a pretty good indicator right off the bat. Some of them appear to be completely mechanical. They even, when they walk together, they even move in harmony. And others appear to be bioentities. They're biological for sure. The thing that seems consistent with many abductees and even some contactees that wake up and realize, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with this picture, is they'll say the same thing. And here's the thing they say. I mean, this is, especially if you touch them. One lady reached over and touched one of them on the chest. She says, and she's a contactee, by the way, and that means she likes these guys. She said, oh my God, he has no soul. Well, bingo, he's hatched, cloned, and manufactured. God's not in that picture. Somebody else is.
Right. Yeah, that would definitely make sense. Now, I'd like to get into your methods of collecting evidence from a scene. How do you go about collecting evidence from an abduction scene?
Okay, very, very good point. And I'll use a case we had some time ago. A case it was referred to me out of Canada. Brian Vike said, told the lady, said, you need to talk to Derrel Sims. He's the one that knows all about evidence and this sort of thing. So this lady contacted me out of Pennsylvania, and she's a black lady. I hear her over the phone, and I said, well, let me ask you a couple of questions before we get into this. I said, tell me your nationality. She said, well, Mr. Sims, I'm black. I said, yes, ma'am, I can hear that in your voice pattern. But what I need to know from you, I said, most of us are not pure anything. We're just not. And she said, oh, well, I'm Cherokee Irish. I said, now that makes sense. I said, 45% of the people taken are Cherokee or Native, best to say Native American, Irish, Celtic, or Scottish. 45%. Absolutely an astounding number. There's no actuarial for some of this stuff. It doesn't even make sense. I said, so I went up there and to investigate the case, and I went there, and I had a TV team with me as well, and I found fingerprints that didn't make any sense. I found a handprint on the wall, but unfortunately the grandmother had drawn a picture around it, and I've still got it. In fact, I cut the sheetrock out of the wall and took the handprint with me on the sheetrock. The father was horrified. He said, what are you doing to my wall? And the woman looked at him and said, don't you interfere with Mr. Sims. He's doing exactly what he needed to be doing, and I told him to do it. And so he backed off real quick. So I got that, brought it back, and I tested for fluorescence. And so we look at a situation like that, especially a fresh scene, as if it's a crime scene, and that's the way you really want to treat it. You want to keep people off of everything you can, and you have to treat it totally different than that. You don't just walk in and start walking over stuff. In other words, if I suspect the aliens actually visited this person, the first place I'm going to check is the place he entered, which is usually the closet, through a wall real near the bed or the closet. That's why many abductees and contactees have a phobia of closets. They either have to have the doors wide open or have them absolutely closed, locked, shut. And because that's where the entity will often come in. They have some idea about that. And the second thing is I don't want anybody tampering with the floor next to the bed, because that's often where you'll find fluorescence if the entity's actually stood there. He's coming from the closet right beside that bed. So these are things, one of the ways I would approach, as an example, an area like that, especially if it's fresh. If I know this event happened last night, I don't want anybody in the room doing anything. And the best way to approach, when you hear the story from the abductee, is like they say, well, he came from the closet to my bed, and he did this, he did that, he took me somewhere and then brought me back, or whatever. The first thing I want to do is to go close as possible to the floor, right next to the bed. And I'm going to bring a black light, specialized black light. I have a special black light because over $500 had an engineer make it for me. And I can see all kinds of nanometer lengths of fluorescence with this specialized light. And I want to also check the floor next to the bed for two things. One is fluorescence. Number two, smells. Because the entity has a specific, distinct odor. And those odors they'll range from like the smell of burnt matches or sulfur. Sulfur will show up a great deal. The second odor that will be most prominent will be the smell of rotten, decayed leather or rotten, decayed cardboard. They're very strange, very strong smells.
Very, very interesting. Now, you said the entities would come through a closet or a wall, and I've heard stories of people saying they've been taken through their walls when they were taken. Is that something you've come across? And if so, how do you think that's occurring?
Certainly, we have these stories. I have 2,000 cases worldwide, and I work these cases, by the way, free of charge. We never charge these people anything. All our work is philanthropic. Even the surgeries we've done have been free, where I can do that, unless they have insurance or something like that. I beg, borrow, and do anything I can to get people to help us on these things, and we're putting some of that information up on our website now on alienhunter.org. But the primary thing is that these people only about, and I need to say this to your audience, about 80% of these people are not taken anywhere. That some people are going to get mad when they hear that. No, I had to be taken. No, you didn't have to be taken anywhere. The fact is, many of the events, the entity comes into the room, uploads, downloads information, and that's it. But in some cases, in 20% of the cases, they do take you somewhere, but they don't always have to. Sometimes they do for a reason. And that it's just that simple. And they'll take you through a wall. They'll float you out, usually in a prone position. Sometimes you'll walk, but sometimes you'll be like on the bed and they'll grab the edge of your foot. And then another reason people have phobias of they have to keep their feet covered up, or they wear socks when they go to bed. They don't want anybody touching their feet, that sort of thing. And because that's where they grab you, they'll just walk you right out, literally, and you'll be floating right out bed level. And sometimes they'll take you out through the ceiling, right straight up. There are different ways that it depends on the mechanism they're using to transport you, so to speak.
Very interesting. I wonder if there's somehow changing your vibratory rate so that you can actually move through these solid objects. That would
in my opinion, there are all kinds of explanations, and one of the best is simply, in my view, is that they're doing something to you, to your molecular system, so that it literally loses its gravity. And when that happens, you'll float, you can fly, you can walk through walls, you can do all kinds of stuff. And it's a process. I think that it is it involves all kinds of things, and not only the mechanics. It's not just a so-called alien skill, that sort of thing, or technology. It may not even be technology, but the point is that from our viewpoint, it's simply an ability to make you literally weightless, and you'll literally float. And I've seen entities that were so small it was amazing, and they could float a 300-pound man out without a problem.
Wow, very interesting. Now we've got a few minutes left. You do hypnotherapy, and this is to try and find out what this person actually experienced. For the last few minutes that we have, could you talk about maybe one of the most fascinating sessions that you've experienced during your hypnotherapy session?
Sure. One of the CNN came to my home for 3 days and wanted to do a special on me, and I brought two people with me. They're excellent citizens in the city of Houston, and they're both abductees. They're professionals, by the way. One of them's a therapist, and I had worked with him in hypnotherapy. And CNN, they claimed they were going to do a totally unbiased program. Well, I called them fake news. This was back in late in the 1990s. I call them fake news. And when I heard Trump call them the same thing, I laughed my head off. I thought, that's the gospel truth, because they flat lied about everything.
Right.
They just did. And anyway, long story short, so I told them I'd never give them another interview, and I haven't since. They said, well, we think that probably what you did was you hypnotized him and you made him believe all this stuff. I said, really? You were leading him on. I said, all questions are leading, sir. I said, do you have any special skills in hypnotherapy? No. Do you have any special skills in therapy? No. I said, I train therapists, PhDs in psychology and psychiatry and so on in some of the areas that I function in. I said, for you to question me, you have absolutely no medical skills, no hypnotherapy skills, no skills whatsoever on how cognitive information is acquired, stored, kept, and retained. And I said, and you sit there and question me? I said, let me carry you backwards. I said, I knew you were going to do this, so I waited for you. First of all, this young man's stories, he got picked up when he was a child and would be with another little boy, and they would be found in different parts of Houston. Now, how do you suppose they got there? By taxi?
Right.
All they described was an alien that took them. And the police never, I said, there were police reports. These kids ended up clean on, Houston's a huge city. And I said, and so for you to question me, I said, second of all, I said, what you don't understand is these stories they're verifiable. You can check them. It's what do you mean? So when I work with a person in hypnotherapy, which is not my primary modality for getting information, I said, and it's the last thing that we do, not the first, the very last thing. I said, I asked them things about the weather, what time of day it is, and everything. I said, what happened on May 13th? What was the weather like on May 13th in 1976? He said, well, I have no clue. And I said, isn't it interesting that he does? And I said, and I can go back and check those weather reports. I said, if that information is correct, it's a good indicator that I've got them in memory and that they are actually giving me good quality information, something that you have not been able to do and that you have lied from the minute you got here. And these people have not. I said, I brought a psych report on these people. I said, you should have brought one on yourself because I'm not convinced that you're sane.
Very good. Now, as far as your hypnotherapy goes, is there any other, cases where you could describe maybe what the, what the person's experience was like for the time being that they were being abducted?
Yes, there's several different things about it. Anybody can hypnotize anybody. You can learn how to hypnotize people. That does not make you a hypnotherapist. It makes you a hypnotist. And there's a world of difference. I treat cases like they are archaeological finds. If you found this bone sticking up in your backyard and we looked at it and we realized this was a Tyrannosaurus Rex, you don't go get your best friend who's got a front end loader and tear up an unbelievably good archaeological site. You don't do that. You call a specialist in, people that know how to handle these kind of cases. The same thing with myself. I would not go out and grab a hypnotist and say, "Oh, you must be a hypnotist, so I need to be hypnotized, so therefore anything you get out of me is going to be truth, and it's not going to be recall, it's going to be pure memory," right? Well, of course it is. They don't have a clue. How do they know what the difference between memory and recall is? How do they know the difference between what the screen memory is that the alien put on you, or an intelligence community, or anyone else? How are they going to know that? You're only going to know that through, number one, by your skills, and second is if you've actually been an abductee, you've been inside that alien's head. If you've been a victim your whole life, they ran your show. When I was 4 years old, I decided he wasn't going to run my show, and I wouldn't let me remember him as a clown. My point is simply this: I've been inside their head. I know how they think. I know what they do. I know how they do it. So I use that to a huge advantage. I know how they install screen memories. I know why they put blocks inside people where hypnotists can't get to them. You can get to the regular stuff. They don't care about that. It doesn't mean anything. Remember what I told you about the first level of truth? It's false. They don't care about it. Doesn't mean anything. What they're concerned with is that you might actually find out what the program is. Now you created a problem, and you're going to create some problems for yourself.
Right. Now, one last question. What do you think about Trump's Space Force?
I think that he's on to something huge, and I think he's one of the few presidents that has got his head screwed on. And the reason I say that is most presidents don't know anything about the UFO phenomenon. Just because you're the president doesn't mean you get to know everything. You're only in there for 4 years or 8 years if you're lucky. Most of them know little. Kennedy knew a fair amount, not much, but a fair amount. Eisenhower knew a lot, and he regretted that he was not able to get a handle on that thing. Kennedy knew enough about it. It got him in a lot of trouble. A lot of trouble. Trump has decided to make a space force. There's a reason for that. Number one, I've told your audience that you better beware of these guys, these so-called aliens, and some of them are not here for your best intent, and there may be other purposes. So one of the reasons we don't go back to the moon anymore, and I've asked numerous astronauts this, why is it that you left the moon? You filmed it, you left, and never went back. And the scuttlebutt, the so-called myth among them is this, that they told us not to come back. Well, who's in charge of the moon? It isn't you. So who's telling us what to do? And why are they doing that? What's the purpose? There are all kinds of, I could spend a whole hour just on my time with the JPL. They invited me to a meeting for the Cassini project. That's where we went to Saturn to find out what was in Saturn. And I asked them at that, I was only a ufologist invited to the Cassini project at JPL in Pasadena, California. And I asked them the big question, why did you leave Mars to go to Saturn? Why would you send the first nuclear package spacecraft to Saturn? What did you find on Saturn that interested you, that you would leave and do that first? They closed that entire meeting down and said, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. There are free drinks in the back and gifts for everyone. And they never addressed the question. Never addressed it. We need a space force.
So you don't think that there's already been a secret space force in place?
There are all kinds of theories about that, and there may have been. I don't know because I wasn't there, so I don't address things that I can't prove or know. Do I suspect that we have things out there better than the things we're flying around in? Yes, I do. Are all the UFOs we're seeing flying around there the alien? No, they are not. They're ours. So am I fooled by that? No, I'm not. Remember the first level of truth for the alien. It's patently untrue. Those are alien spaceships. No, they're all not. No,
right.
They're not. The wonderful thing I told my native friends, and I'll tell this last thing for your audience, I said it's fascinating to look at these pictographs on the walls and see the alien literally has a ram, a sheep, taking sheep off the earth up into the spacecraft. The first case of mutilations and stolen animals abducted as well. I said, they weren't here to save your sheep, and they're not here to save your cattle. They're not here to save or help you either. There's three levels of truth with these guys, and the first one's patently untrue. The second level is you're being spoon-fed or misled, and third one is you're close to the fire. And I think the fact that they have a space force, I think Trump may be opening up for the first time in 50 years, at least 50 years, something, at least just a glimmer of hope that we might be able to find out something what's really going on. And I assure you, if he talks too much or finds out too much, they'll shut him down just like they have others.
Right. Yeah, and that's a whole other show to talk about there. But Derrel, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. That was fantastic information, and I'm going to have to definitely have you back on one day.
I'd love to be back, Chris. You got a great program.
Great. Thank you so much, and you have a great night.
Have a good one.